Hi guys, Todd Bowley here. I know how this looks, but don't worry because I've hatched a plan to save Chelsea Football Club. I mean, so far I've sacked a Champions League winning manager, I've sacked one of the most promising up-and-coming young managers after giving him just 7 months, I've sacked his assistant, and I've hired Frank Lampard for absolutely no reason. But here we are, here's the plan, and just hear me out on this one. What if I sack Frank Lampard as well? Old Graham Potter, just how did we get here? Through 7 years at Swedish club Östersund and a further year at Championship side Swansea, Graham Potter reached the Premier League with Brighton, where he led them after 3 years to their highest position in the table in the club's history. Chelsea appointed him as their manager on the 8th of September 2022, and 7 months later, Potter finds himself out of a job, his reputation damaged, and in some circles, a complete laughingstock. Graham Potter, a mid-table manager who's too nice to manage an elite club, or a misunderstood tactician who simply just needed more time. Following a summer of massive upheaval for Chelsea Football Club, which saw Roman Abramovich forced to relinquish ownership due to sanctions following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the new Bowley-led consortium ushered in an unprecedented spending spree. With Tuchel still at the helm and having some say in transfer market business, Chelsea saw the likes of Raheem Sterling, Koulibaly, Chukwuemeka, Aubameyang, Fofana and Cucurella all join the club. Interestingly, it seems like the negotiations between Brighton and Chelsea for the sale of Cucurella is what led Bowley into thinking about Potter as his final piece to the Chelsea puzzle. Tuchel's third season with Chelsea started somewhat poorly, picking up 10 points out of a possible 18 in the league, and following a 1-0 loss to Dynamo Zagreb in their opening Champions League fixture, Bowley had seen enough and decided that the man to bring Champions League glory just 15 months ago, well, just had to go. In his place, Chelsea would appoint a manager to have never managed a Champions League game and whose trophy cabinet could only boast a singular Swedish Cup 7 years ago. But they would also be appointing a manager whose stock was at the highest level it had ever been. A manager looked upon fondly by the fans of his current club, praised by neutrals and lauded by many other big clubs in England. If Chelsea's interest in Graham Potter raised eyebrows in the first place, then Graham Potter's mutual interest in the Chelsea job raised equally as many too. If you're watching this, I think I'm safe to assume that you already know the culture and climate around Chelsea Football Club when it comes to managerial appointments, so I'll save the history lesson. Sacking managers at the first sign of a results downturn is baked into the club's modern history, and a win now or get out mentality is practically what glues the bricks of Stamford Bridge together in place of cement. And well, interestingly and maybe even frustratingly for a neutral onlooker such as myself, this short-term thinking and approach to managerial decisions has been a massive success for the club. In the past 5 years, Chelsea have tasted victory in the FA Cup, the Europa League and the Champions League, with all 3 of those tournament victories coming under 3 separate managers. The general feeling at the time was that although Potter was seemingly destined for bigger things and to progress his way into even higher echelons of football management, a sense among some that he was being earmarked to be the next England manager, there was also an understanding that Potter was a smart man who wouldn't join a club that didn't have the right mentality and foundations for him to succeed. His previous team of Brighton, of course, being one of the best run clubs in the league under owner Tony Bloom, and had created an environment which had facilitated Potter's exponential rise in stature through scouting, recruitment, and most importantly, patience. I'm not here to fool anyone into thinking that Potter's time in any of his previous appointments have always been plain sailing, an easy ride with an instant improvement each time he was appointed. Instead, I think it's important to highlight that Potter's style of management almost always guarantees the exact opposite. Potter's first season as Brighton manager saw his side finish 16th in the table with 41 points, hardly setting the world on fire and leaving many Brighton fans wondering if they'd even upgraded from their previous manager of Chris Hughton. Potter's second season at the Goals saw them finish up 41 points yet again, and this featured a winless run of 10 games. Potter's third and final full season at Brighton finally saw his side moulded into the flourishing modern Brighton that we think of today, with exciting attacking football, slick passing moves, and forwards missing easy chances. Brighton finished in 9th place with 51 points, smashing their previous points tally and finishing in the highest position in the Football League in the club's history. This season also included the 4-0 demolition of Man United at the Amex in one of the most historic days in the entire club's lifetime. Even in this record-breaking season, Brighton went winless in 12 games before the Christmas period, a period that saw Potter booed by his own fans. Hopefully, by now, you see my point. If we were to broadly categorise all football managers across a scale of win now and instantly get results to sacrifice instant results to build something for the future, then, well, it's obvious which side of the scale Potter finds himself on. And while we're here, which side of the scale do you think Chelsea Football Club is on, given their history? And in that sense, maybe Potter deserves some of the blame here. Of all the teams in the league, on paper, Chelsea are arguably the worst fit. As mentioned, Chelsea's history of hiring and firing managers as soon as they've had a bad run of games is not only well known, but celebrated amongst their fan base, and this was always going to lie juxtaposed with Potter's ideologies as a coach. But at the same time, it's easy to see how Potter may have been convinced that that way of thinking at the club was in the past. As mentioned, Chelsea are now under new ownership under Bowley. Bowley and his team had specifically sought out Potter, and seemingly only Potter, as Tuchel's replacement, with reports at the time stating that Bowley knew everything there was to know about Potter's history and saw him as the coach to be at Stamford Bridge for years and years. Considering the man Bowley had replaced as Chelsea owner, is it that far-fetched to think that he'd bring a completely new outlook and direction for the club? A more patient timeline, less reactionary firings, and a new culture. Obviously, we don't know the conversations between Bowley and Potter prior to the appointment, but if the chairman knows everything about him, then he also knows about Potter's teams needing time and rough moments where his teams seemingly can't buy a win. Potter has spoken many times in the past before about joining a club with the right environment to succeed, and I'm willing to assume that he would not have agreed to become the new Chelsea head coach unless Bowley had assured him of one. And oh boy, what an environment he was given. Already on somewhat rough foundations, having to succeed the highly popular and respected Thomas Tuchel, who had made Chelsea champions of Europe 15 months prior, Potter entered the club with much to prove and many inside and outside of the club in need of being won over. Potter's start at Chelsea started well with 3 league victories against Palace, Wolves and Villa and 2 draws versus Brentford and Man United. But the tumultuous days were fast approaching. With injuries to key players such as Kante, Chilwell, James, Mount and Thiago Silva, the wheels started to fall off the bus before the winter break for the World Cup. On return, Chelsea's recruitment continued during the January transfer window, leading to another unprecedented spending spree, this time with a major focus on young, unproven players on extremely long contracts. David Fofana, Badiashile, João Felix, Mudryk, Madueke and Enzo Fernandez all joined the club, leading to a bloated and unwieldy dressing room. With players returning from injury, Potter faced a first-team group which at times featured 40 available players. A mix of homegrown youngsters who had been sold a dream of first-team football, foreign youngsters with no Premier League experience, new Premier League signings looking to kickstart their careers again, core players from the previous Thomas Tuchel regime, and even new players like Aubameyang specifically brought in under Thomas Tuchel's request. To further exacerbate this, departures of the aforementioned Aubameyang and Ziyech during the same transfer window had fallen through, leading to at least 2 players publicly wanting out of the club, forced to remain with 38 others in a crowded Chelsea dressing room. This is just an unmanageable environment for any first team coach to work in, let alone someone like Graham Potter, someone with a master's degree in emotional intelligence who has stated publicly how he likes to evaluate his players as people first before evaluating them as footballers. With 40 first teamers and reports of simultaneous 11-a-side and 9-a-side games having to take place during training to fit everyone in, how could he evaluate his team as footballers, let alone as people? It's madness. We're talking about reports of players having to get changed in the corridors because the dressing room was too full. Potter found himself having to have awkward conversations with Badiashile, Madueke and Fofana as the club couldn't even register them for the Champions League as they already had too many players. Aubameyang, who was signed for Tuchel and played under him for a grand total of 60 minutes before Tuchel got the sack, also had to be omitted from Champions League registration. This is just an untenable and unworkable situation for any manager to really succeed in. The writing was already on the wall. Let's go back to the strategy and the foresight of the owners. If you don't like Thomas Tuchel and he's not your man, why did you even sign Aubameyang? If you think Potter's the man for the job and you want him coaching your team for years and years, then why have you rushed in 6 January signings for £300 million? Bowley's scattershot and slapdash January spending spree didn't do an awful lot to actually improve the team or fill some gaping holes in the squad. Much has been made regarding the £300 million figure Chelsea reportedly spent in this window. It's one of the most expensively assembled squads of all time. Potter must be doing better with the players at his disposal. But let's look at the actual detail here. Any player's transfer market value is not only determined in conjunction with their current ability, but also via their perceived potential ability, length of their current contract, and the desire the selling club has to make the deal. Mudryk, Madueke, Fofana, Badiashile, Enzo Fernandez are all young, unproven players, all with potentially massive futures in the game, but far from the finished products now. How many of these actually improved on Chelsea's current squad? Enzo Fernandez, possibly, and that's really about it. Importantly, let's look at the type of profile brought in here. Where is the fullback cover for perpetually injured Ben Chilwell and Reece James? Where is the ball-winning midfielder to cover for Kante? And importantly, where is a single player who can actually put the ball into the back of the net? A criticism of Graham Potter's time with Brighton was his side's perceived tendency to rack up multiple high-scoring chances throughout a game, but then lack a cutting edge to actually finish any of them. There was a feeling that Potter's Brighton side simply needed a striker to finish all of these gilt-edged chances, and Potter, moving to a big club with actual forwards who didn't just bottle it in front of goal, would be a perfect match for his coaching system, which often saw his side dominate the XG. Ironically, Potter walked into a Chelsea side that had spent £540 million across 2 transfer windows this season, with precisely the same issues he walked away from Brighton with. As of writing, Chelsea's top scorer this season is Kai Havertz, who boasts a whopping 9 goals in 41 appearances across all competitions. Second on this list is Raheem Sterling with 7, and the now departed Jorginho with 3. According to the stats provided by Understat, in the Premier League, Chelsea have scored 30 goals from an XG of 42.27. That's an underperformance of 12.27, the worst in the league apart from Everton. Just where are the goals supposed to come from? As of the 14th of April, Chelsea have now played for more than 6 hours and have taken 61 shots since their last goal. This article from the Racing Post estimates that the odds of an average team not scoring from 61 shots is 1,000 to 1. Against Aston Villa, In Potter's final game as Chelsea manager, Chelsea took 27 shots in that game alone without scoring. 27! And while we're here, I'd like to look at Potter's last game in charge versus Aston Villa, as I think it acted as a microcosm for his time at the club. For this game, Potter went with a 3-4-3 featuring Havertz and Mudryk behind Felix. However, out of possession, there was a clear intention to press from the front and prevent Aston Villa playing out from the back. Because of this, Felix and Havertz often split to occupy Mings and Konza, and wingbacks Chilwell and Loftus-Cheek pushed high on the Villa fullbacks, encouraging them to play long or force them into an awkward situation when trying to play out short. Early in the game, this played out perfectly. Here we see Felix and Havertz occupying Mings and Konza. Chilwell is pushed high on the left, with Loftus-Cheek out of shot on the right, also pushing high to occupy opposing fullbacks. Cleverly, Mudryk is positioned behind the front two to not allow Kamara to pick up the ball. This is an obvious game plan that has been clearly coached by Potter to exploit a weakness. If Aston Villa play their way out of this situation and for 90 minutes this game plan doesn't lead to anything, I'd hold my hands up here and say that Potter got it wrong and that this system was a mistake and a waste. Instead, this happens. The ball is played back to Martinez, who tries to feed Kamara. Mudryk immediately sees the situation, one which he would have been prepared for, and in this moment executes the game plan by stealing the ball from Kamara. At this point, Potter's work is done. He set up his team in this specific way to cause this specific instance and create a gilt-edge goal-scoring chance. Havertz is completely alone, unmarked, and stood 7 yards from an open goal. All Mudryk has to do here is square the ball and it's 1-0 Chelsea. Instead, he inexplicitly just shoots directly into an oncoming Martinez. Havertz is left perplexed and the chance is wasted. Now, let me ask you the question. What on earth is Potter supposed to do here? He's found the weakness, he's picked the team and the system, and he's coached the situation. Mudryk, the £70 million man, simply has to square the ball for the easiest goal in Havertz's career. Potter can't pass the ball to Havertz himself. The chance creation is his work and the execution is his players'. Inexplicitly bad execution from this Chelsea team littered this entire game. The opening Aston Villa goal comes from similarly brain-dead decision-making. Here we see Douglas Luiz on the ball with no real options around him. Again, Felix occupying the centre-back and Mudryk occupying Kamara, so he can't easily get on the ball. Thanks to Potter's well-coached Chelsea system, Luiz has to hit long towards 3 Chelsea centre-backs in James, Cucurella and Koulibaly. A ball that is clearly Koulibaly's to easily deal with is weirdly intercepted by his own teammate in Cucurella, who attempts one of the most ridiculous back passes I've ever seen. James is free, Loftus-Cheek is free, and he's under no pressure. Why does he do this? The ball falls directly to Ollie Watkins, who lobs Kepa. Again, I find it impossible to really blame Potter here. The system is set up for Luiz to hit a hopeful hoof towards the Chelsea back line, and it's only really Cucurella's incompetence that causes a massive Aston Villa chance. Again, what is Potter supposed to do about this? With the game still in the balance at 1-0, Mudryk pulls off Kamara and finds a gap to run into. Again, because Konza is occupied by the Felix threat behind him. Kovacic slips in the ball and, well, just look at this situation. How on earth does this not result in a goal? Again, Potter's work takes place up until this moment. The decision to have Mudryk occupy Kamara and then pull off him, and the system to make Konza worry about the Felix threat. This is a dream situation for any forward, and in this moment Potter can no longer do anything. As ridiculous as this is to say, he can't, pause time here and put himself on the pitch and finish the chance himself. His coaching and his preparation has got his forward all alone, one-on-one with the goalkeeper, and now it's up to the Todd Boehly signing to do the simplest of tasks in rolling the ball past him. Of course, Mudryk inexplicitly takes the chance far too early and scuffs it tamely into Martinez's arms. Matters get worse for Potter in the second half as an Aston Villa corner is fed to McGinn at the edge of the box, who finds his route to goal blocked by about 20 different players. Of course, he finds a way to smash the ball past Kepa anyway. In the post-match press conference, Potter got a lot of stick from Chelsea fans for claiming that this was a low XG chance. Oh, it's Graham Potter, the expected goals man who can't stop talking about expected goals. But I mean, he's totally right, isn't he? McGinn takes about 5 of these long-range shots every game that almost always just fly over the bar. This isn't a chance carved out by Emery's system. This isn't even a good chance created through sheer luck. This is a wonder hit from absolutely nothing that I'm not sure Potter can do anything about. Chelsea ended the game with 2.49 expected goals as Mudryk, Felix, Chilwell, Koulibaly and the rest of the familiar culprits failed to convert from 27 shots. Villa win the game 2-0 with a total of 5 shots, none coming from within the Chelsea penalty area, and following this game, Potter is sacked. Let's just take a moment here to make it clear that I don't think every single Chelsea game with Potter in charge was like this, and that Chelsea deserved to win every game and the players let him down every time. I do not think that. Chelsea had some awful performances and some awful results under Graham Potter, which were as much his responsibility as his players. I'm also not trying to say that Potter never made a mistake in the team that he picked or that he never mishandled the dressing room at times. My point is this. Bowley surely knew that rough moments and teething problems come hand in hand with the Graham Potter side. At every club in his managerial career, there have been tough moments that have needed patience and calm thinking to allow his teams to emerge the other side in a stronger and in a more competitive position. The board apparently not seeing progress was one of the main reasons given for Potter's sacking after just 7 months. But if we look at the data, I can't really see how this can be the case. In fact, I think it's actually the opposite. Here we can see a 9-game rolling average XG plot for Chelsea over the last 5 seasons. Potter's reign started well, with Chelsea outperforming their opponents before a December to January wobble where Chelsea were admittedly quite awful under Potter. But with players returning from injury and Potter's ideas starting to take shape, the team was genuinely beginning to improve again once more under him, with his sacking coming right as the team looked like they were about to kick on. Now, of course, this is an expected goal difference plot. The data doesn't necessarily line up with the results at the times during each period, but using the Villa game as an example, how much of this is down to Chelsea players misfiring at vital moments, and how much can Potter actually control? Despite a 2-0 loss to Aston Villa, a club run by a Tony Bloom-esque ownership would surely see the performance as actually a good one with a very undeserved result. And despite Chelsea sitting in 10th at the time, there is data here to show that Chelsea were often a better side than their place in the table showed. Look, any Chelsea fan watching this is probably raging at what I've just said, if they haven't already clicked off the video, but a major part in running a football club well is being able to separate a performance from a result. Football is chaotic and teams can play very well and lose, or they can play very badly and win. Over the course of a season, or even several seasons, the difference between the two often even out, and that can be seen very clearly if we look across London at another club. Under Mikel Arteta, Arsenal finished 10th in the Premier League twice, and then last season they finished 5th after bottling Champions League qualification to bitter rivals Tottenham. Under Chelsea ownership, would this have been allowed? Absolutely not, but Arsenal made their decision to go with Arteta, and they gave him time and patience through the good and the bad. 6 transfer windows and 3 full pre-seasons later, Arsenal now sit atop of the table, and at the time of writing, the biggest prize in England is fully within their hands. They have the youngest squad in the league and looks positioned to challenge for major honours for years to come. And, you know, that's what it takes to seriously compete, especially if your aim is to compete for the Premier League. Chelsea have had major success in knockout competitions, but when was the last time Chelsea actually had a sustained challenge for the Premier League title? A forward-thinking, long-term appointment like Potter could have been a real opportunity to foster a real long-term challenge for the title year after year. Things got bad at Chelsea. I'm not trying to sugarcoat it. Things got very bad. Potter leaves Chelsea with the lowest points tally of any manager, and he leaves Chelsea with them sat in 11th. I get it, this is by any definition not good, but it was the same over in North London not so long ago. The difference being is that Arsenal sacrificed short-term results for a long-term gain, and look at them now. Potter has a proven track record at improving every club he's ever been at. He took over Aston from the 4th division in Sweden to beating Arsenal at the Emirates. He took Brighton from relegation candidates to their best performances in the club's entire history. He was only at Swansea for one season, but can still boast a run to the quarter-finals of the FA Cup. He's a project manager that needs time to instill a culture and a playing style which can look awkward and painful at points, but has always left the club in a better position than when he started, if he's given the time. Todd Boehly surely knows all of this, and yet for some reason decided to sack him 7 months in anyway. Potter leaves Chelsea without even having a chance to have a single pre-season. It's madness. When you sack a proven manager like Thomas Tuchel, who for the record I don't think should have even been sacked in the first place, then I really feel like the season is a write-off there and then. Chelsea already wasted a pre-season and a summer transfer window on a manager who they then just sacked a few games in. No matter who comes in after that, the season was already going to be an uphill battle. Swallow the pill, take the hit, finish mid-table and then build. Clear out the squad, back the man you've said you're going to back, give him at least one pre-season and let him cook. Maybe Todd Boehly wanted to do this, but the atmosphere around Stamford Bridge was too toxic. Maybe not. Either way, Todd Boehly becomes the first Chelsea owner to sack 2 managers in a single season. Not even the ruthless Roman Abramovich did that. Since his departure, Bruno Saltor took charge of the 0-0 draw versus Liverpool, a game where Chelsea took another 12 shots without scoring, before Lampard was hired as caretaker manager until the end of the season. Lampard's Chelsea then promptly lost to Wolves, where they took another 13 shots without scoring, and then lost away to Madrid, where they took a further 7 shots without finding the back of the net. It should be no surprise to anyone that with Potter gone but the same players remaining, the team is suffering from the same problems. Potter is gone and Bruno is gone and Lampard is in, and Chelsea still aren't going to finish in any European place. The chances of them doing so were already slim once they sacked Tuchel after just 6 league games, let alone now. Potter had to go because short-term results were so bad, but sacking him hasn't improved short-term results in any way. If anything, they've gotten worse. Now, Chelsea will ride out the season, swallow their pride and rebuild in the summer, and, well, couldn't they have just done that with Potter? Now, not only do they need a squad clean-out, they also need to find a new manager. A new manager who won't like some of the £500 million worth of signings Boehly has brought in. A new manager who will demand new signings. A manager who will have a different system and a different coaching style. Chelsea will start again, and if they go on another run of bad results, will they just sack the manager and repeat the process? The thinking around some of the prospective candidates to succeed Potter as Chelsea manager is perplexing too, as it further demonstrates this lack of synergy in Chelsea's thinking. Nagelsmann and Luis Enrique seem like the odds-on favourite at this time. Both are good managers, but Nagelsmann has been moulded in the Red Bull style at RB Leipzig, a tactician who has a very specific outlook on how to play the game, with a focus on high-intensity pressing and an energetic brand of football. Does this really match with like Aubameyang or Lukaku returning on loan? Can you see Kovacic or a 38-year-old Thiago Silva pushing high, rushing about the pitch and flying into challenges? If you want Nagelsmann, if Nagelsmann is the man now, then you'll need to overhaul the squad to suit him. You'll need to give him time and several transfer windows to let him get his ideas across. All things that Chelsea didn't afford to Graham Potter. There's also a massive pang of irony in Chelsea hiring the manager that Tuchel had just replaced at Bayern. Oh, and just quickly while we're here, I could have written this exact video for Bayern's decision to sack Nagelsmann at a time where his side sat second in the Bundesliga and he guided them to 8 out of 8 Champions League victories. Since Tuchel's hiring, Bayern are no better in the league. They've been dumped out of the German Cup and they've been dumped out of the Champions League too. Goes to show it's not just the Chelsea board that have totally lost their heads when it comes to managerial appointments. And, well, how about Luis Enrique? I think it's mostly a similar story. Part of me questions Luis Enrique's previous credentials. He had a mixed time at Roma and at Celta, and 2 pretty disastrous tournaments as Spain head coach, which saw them most recently get dumped out by Morocco. He did win everything with Barcelona, but that was also with one of the greatest teams assembled in the history of this sport. Still, like Nagelsmann and like Potter, Luis Enrique is a project manager with strict ideas and values in what he wants from his team. You can't plug in Luis Enrique and expect the team to be playing tiki-taka possession football within a few games. It's going to take time and transfer windows and seasons of tinkering and teaching. Will Luis Enrique be afforded the time to do that? Somewhat sadly, I think the answer is actually yes. The board have finally written off the season, and it seems like whoever comes in next will have a much better environment to succeed in than what Potter was afforded. There will almost certainly be a squad clear-out in the summer, with rumours of a fire sale to meet financial fair play regulations, and whoever does come in will at least be afforded some pre-season time to get some ideas across. If reports are to be believed, Nkunku has already signed and will be a Chelsea player next season who will almost certainly help with their lack of goals. After this mess of a Chelsea season, Chelsea can't really get much worse, and whoever comes in will almost certainly get better results. I'm sure this will lead to many writing off Graham Potter further still. I can't believe Potter had the team playing this badly. Just look how much better we are without Potter and with Luis Enrique. But as I've tried to explain here, the situation for whoever is next will be vastly different to what Potter was afforded. Look, I don't know, maybe I'm the only one who cares, but I find the whole thing actually quite sad. Graham Potter, a very decent man and a great football coach with a track record of improving football clubs, feels hung out to dry here. Following reports of his own players calling him Harry Potter or Hogwarts like dumb teenagers, he leaves his opportunity at the big time after 7 measly months in charge. There's been so much talk of Potter being too nice and not showing enough fight, and when he did proclaim that Chelsea were going to, quote, try and win the fucking Champions League, people had a problem with that too and criticised that it was out of character. What do people really want from him? I just feel that attitudes towards managerial appointments from both clubs and fans in England can be absurdly brain dead. Whenever any up-and-coming manager is linked with one of the top jobs in the Premier League, 2 things always happen. Firstly, any manager available is only judged on their last stretch of their latest managerial appointment. Apart from some very specific exceptions, the vast majority of managers leave a football club because things go bad and they get sacked. That's just how the sport works. But things going wrong at a club in the last 6 months and getting the sack doesn't immediately negate the years of excellent work previous. To use an example, the amount of criticism and snobbery I'm seeing towards the likes of Brendan Rodgers is just maddening because of a bad ending with his time at Leicester. Rodgers did fantastic work at Leicester and at Celtic and at Liverpool, but now he's treated like some second-rate manager who no big Premier League club would look at just because things went wrong in a bad spell this season. And secondly, big teams in the Premier League are obsessed with hiring managers with perceived winning mentalities or managers who are, serial winners. How many times have you heard fans turn their nose up at a manager because they've never won anything? What this leads to is a revolving carousel of familiar faces at the top of the English game. A catch-22 where you don't get to manage a big side unless you've won something, and you're not winning something in England unless you're already managing a big side. Ironically, I think Potter has done everything you'd want a manager to do in this instance, and it still didn't work out. He went away to Sweden, he won back-to-back promotions, he won the Swedish Cup, he came to Swansea and he got championship experience. He went to Brighton and he led them to their best results in the club's history, and despite all of this was sacked in just 7 months. And for what? To be replaced with Luis Enrique, who's only ever won things with one of the best teams of all time, or Nagelsmann, who has only ever won one Bundesliga title with the team that always wins the Bundesliga title. Look, I'm not trying to belittle either of those managers or diminish their accomplishments. I'm not even trying to make the argument that Potter is somehow objectively better than either of those candidates. I'm just trying to show how absurd the mentality is when it comes to who is and who isn't respected as a football manager. And then we sit here and we complain about there being no English managers in the Premier League or none worthy of managing the national side. I'm not saying Chelsea Football Club have a responsibility to give young managers, English or otherwise, a chance. It's their football club. They can hire and fire whoever they want, and they aren't a charity. I totally get that, and I don't begrudge them for it. I just can't help but find the whole thing incredibly frustrating. Graham Potter, a manager who went away, learnt his craft, came back and has proven himself at all of his previous appointments, is now tossed aside and kicked back down the ladder, potentially to forever be labelled as a mid-table manager who can't manage big sides and conceivably set to bound around mid-table clubs for all of eternity. Just where is the pathway here? To me, becoming the manager of a relegation-threatened side and managing to keep them up, or taking charge of a mid-table team and getting them playing beyond their budgetary constraints, are just as good indicators of success as winning a league title with Bayern Munich. But the English game simply just doesn't see it that way. Never forget, Jurgen Klopp was hired as Dortmund manager in 2008 after getting Mainz relegated and then failing to get them promoted the season after. At the time, there was reportedly heavy interest from Bayern Munich in him, not just Dortmund. In Premier League terms, that would be like Man United hiring Dyche. It just wouldn't happen. Wherever Potter does end up next, he'll need to be afforded time and patience. Bringing Graham Potter aboard may very well bring pain points and a run of bad results, but it will also bring a massive chance at getting the team to perform well beyond their means. The bookies favour potentially West Ham or even Spurs for Potter next, and wherever he goes, I genuinely hope he succeeds, because Graham Potter is a success story that deserves to have a successful ending. A manager who wasn't afraid to take risks, wasn't afraid to go and manage outside of the big leagues of Europe, and wasn't afraid to build his way up to earn the right to be managing elite teams in professional football. And a manager who has done all of it by reportedly being a nice guy and showing respect to the people around him. I just hope that the game can show some respect back the other way, despite the disaster his Chelsea stint ended up becoming. Sorry, who did you just say? Thomas Frank. Who's that then? We're Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. We need a big-time manager. Marco Silva. Didn't he almost get Everton relegated? Rubbish manager. Eddie Howe. He got Bournemouth relegated, didn't he? Awful manager. We're too big of a club for any of that dross. Nah, come on. We need a serial winner at Spurs. Not like any of those other losers. Here's the plan. We should get Antonio Conte. Antonio Conte at White Hart Lane. What could possibly go wrong?